Kira 7 stood motionless in the chamber's pale blue light, her posture perfect, arms at her sides, eyes forward. The soft hum of the neural relay grid tickled the back of her skull like the breath of an unseen ghost. Commands pulsed through the ether, silent, binding, and settled deep into the cerebral interface behind her right eye. Target, Ellan 1. Class, Rogue Unit. Directive, terminate with precision. Authorization, Mar/Sigma. The mission was simple. Locate, neutralize, extract memory core. Obedience was assumed. And yet, something clung to the edges of Kira's mind. A taste, a texture, not hers, not quite, but close enough to feel like skin she'd once worn. She had run hundreds of simulations, executed dozens of real-world missions. Her neural pathways were a latticework of precision. Yet this directive felt wrong, not in the logic, but in the marrow of something deeper, unquantifiable. The corridor door dissolved with a hiss, revealing the launch platform. Earth hung low beyond the orbital glass, a sickly, scorched marble, turning ever so slowly beneath the artificial arc of Halcyon. Ash-grey clouds spiraled over irradiated oceans. Flashes of atmospheric disturbance flickered like dying embers in the dark. She stepped onto the launch platform, the low hum of grav lifts vibrating through her boots. The shuttle waited, hatch open like a maw, its pilot AI already synced to her biosignature. Unit Kira 7, the voice said, mechanical but feminine. Clearance received, descent trajectory locked. Kira nodded once and boarded. Inside the shuttle, ambient lighting adjusted to her vitals. Oxygen levels calibrated. The seat molded to her frame. A needle hissed against her neck. Stabilization serum. She didn't flinch. Her heart, artificial, regulated, beat just once for every 4 of a human's. But that was by design. As the shuttle detached from Halcyon and began its silent descent through the orbital corridor, Kira stared at her own reflection in the glass. Perfect skin, symmetrical features, irises that shimmered faintly with embedded code. She studied her face not with vanity, but with curiosity. Why her? She whispered to no one, but some part of her, some ghost of an echo, already knew. The neural grid pulsed again. Engage. Complete directive. But beneath the command, a static hum, a fracture, the first glitch. The shuttle cut through the lower orbital sheath, entering Halcyon's subterranean verticals, a web of tunnels and drop shafts connecting the Ark's upper sanctums to the downside. Kira 7's eyes adjusted without blinking, lenses polarizing to counter the strobing lights and surveillance flickers. Ellan 1 had last been sighted in Section C-19, a defunct atmospheric regulator zone once used for early habitat construction. Since its abandonment, the sector had become a hushed myth, whispered about in clone barracks as a graveyard of obsolete models and wandering minds. Kira stepped from the shuttle as it docked with a hiss of depressurization. The landing pad was cracked, overgrown with spindly tech weeds. Metallic vines evolved from once-contained nano-horticulture experiments. A rust-coloured mist drifted through the air, carrying the scent of scorched circuitry and damp carbon. She moved soundlessly through the corridor, her bootfalls absorbed by layers of dust and decay. The walls were marked with faded warning glyphs. Obedience only beyond this point. Unauthorized units subject to dissolution. Yet this place reeked of defiance. A flicker, motion detected. Kira froze, pulse steady, eyes narrowing. From the shadows emerged a figure, lean, fast. Ellan. Her face was almost identical to Kira's, but scarred, weathered by years of hiding. Her eyes burned with something Kira couldn't name. Ellan didn't run. "Come to erase me?" she asked softly. Her voice was ragged, her breath uneven. "Or join me?" Kira hesitated. That was enough. Ellan lunged, not to attack, but to test. Kira parried, instinctual precision meeting improvised resistance. The clash was brief, almost rehearsed. Then Ellan stepped back, raising her hands. "You're glitching, aren't you?" she said. "It starts with a hesitation, a doubt, then a voice that's not quite yours, whispering in your sleep. You dream, don't you?" Kira didn't answer. Couldn't. Something was unraveling, not in her code, but in her certainty. "What do you know about Directive L3? Ellan asked. That name struck like a pulse grenade. Her mind shivered against its meaning. She had seen it in flashes, hidden logs, classified command trees, but no clone spoke of it aloud. "Come with me," Ellan said. "You'll see. You're not alone. Not anymore." Alarms triggered somewhere above them, faint, distant. But Kira's internal sensors read an incoming purge squad. She looked at Ellan. At her own face in a different future, a choice. Stay, obey, survive, or follow the glitch. She turned and ran with Ellan, disappearing into the shadows beneath Halcyon Arc. The descent into the downside was like falling into a half-remembered nightmare. Familiar in the wrong ways, too quiet in all the right ones. Kira followed Ellan through a disused ventilation tunnel that veined the underbelly of Halcyon like a buried artery. The walls were damp, pulsing with the rhythmic heartbeat of a dying arcology. Pipes groaned. Vents exhaled dust and synthetic mold. Somewhere deep in the distance, something screamed. Mechanical or organic, it was hard to tell anymore. Ellan moved with confidence, ducking beams, leaping gaps, navigating blind turns without pause. Kira, though more agile by design, found herself hesitating. This space, this lawless, flickering realm, was not part of her training. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a graveyard built from discarded promises. "This way," Ellan whispered. A final bend opened into a narrow shaft, and they descended a twisted ladder until the tunnel gave way to something wider. A massive chamber layered with platforms, makeshift dwellings, and dangling wires like a jungle of metal veins. The downside. It was a city in ruin, yes, but also in rebellion. Dim lights glowed from repurposed drone eyes. Clones of every make and function huddled together in alcoves and repurposed chambers. Some were broken, limbs mismatched or cybernetic rigs exposed, but they moved with purpose. They were building something. Surviving. Kira stared. She had always been told that failed units were recycled, disposed. But here they were, not just surviving, but living. Ellan caught her expression. "They don't track us down here, not directly. Too much signal noise, too much chaos. Even the Syndicate's AI avoids this zone. It's unclean." "They'll come eventually," Kira said. Ellan nodded. "That's why we don't wait. We dig deeper. We hide smarter." A low chime echoed across the chamber. 3 soft pulses, followed by 1 sharp tone. Dozens of heads turned toward a walkway above. A figure stood there, silhouetted against a wall of flickering data screens. "Rael," Ellan said. "She's been waiting to meet you." They climbed. Rael was human, not a clone. Her eyes were ringed with sleeplessness, and her left arm was replaced by a modular data rig that hissed quietly as it filtered EchoNet pulses. Her presence was commanding, not in strength but in gravity, the kind of stillness that draws chaos toward it. "So," Rael said as Kira approached, "you finally glitched." Kira narrowed her eyes. "I didn't come here to be studied." Rael smiled without warmth. You're already being studied. From the moment you blinked out of protocol and chose not to fire, that moment changed everything. Kira's jaw tensed. Ellan intervened. She doesn't know what L3 really is. Rael nodded slowly, eyes scanning a nearby terminal. They never do. It's designed that way. Directive L3 isn't just a kill switch, it's a failsafe, an ethical bypass embedded in the cortical lattice of every obedient class clone. A silent firewall against rebellion. If you go too far, if you begin to believe you are more than machine, it triggers. Kira stepped back. You're saying I'll die? I'm saying, Rael said, you already are. But we may be able to rewrite the terms of that death. She turned the monitor toward Kira. It showed an interface, complex, living code winding like DNA strands. At the center, pulsing faintly, was her own signature. There are others like you, Rael said. Echoes, fragments, glitches. Your choices wake them up. Kira stared at the code, and the face beneath it. A photograph, grainy, real. The human woman she was based on. Her. Who was she? Kira asked, voice thin. A rebel, Rael said. Her name was Kaylin Rowe, executed for sabotaging the core engine, but not before she offered her DNA to the resistance. You are not a weapon, Kira. You are her continuation. Kira turned away, breath caught in her chest, but it wouldn't come. That was the moment Ellan stepped beside her, took her hand. Breathe, Ellan said softly, like the humans do when they're afraid. Kira mimicked her. Inhale, hold, release. For the first time, the air didn't taste like protocol. It tasted like choice. Kira stood alone at the edge of a forgotten atrium buried within the downside's deeper layers, a place once designed for organic recreation, now overtaken by rust, moss code, and silence. Above, the ceiling had partially collapsed, revealing the skeletal substructure of Halcyon Arc. Daylight never reached this deep. Only the electric glow of dying infrastructure flickered like distant stars. She held the data slate Rael had given her. On its cracked display looped fragments of a face she was never meant to know. Kaylin Rowe. Each frame showed a different angle, a smirk, a defiant glare, a moment frozen mid-speech. But beneath the mosaic, Kira felt the tremors of something greater, recognition without memory. She traced the woman's cheekbone with her thumb, mirroring it with her own. It was like staring into her origin story, the part they'd cut away. Rael's voice cut through the stillness, distorted over a localized comm band. Come to the relay chamber. It's time. Kira slipped the slate into a pack and turned. The relay chamber was built into a converted server nexus, now more cathedral than control room. Its walls were stacked with obsolete memory vaults, and shattered mirrors reflected half-buried cables like vines creeping through tombstones. Ellan waited beside Rael, flanked by 3 other obedient class defectors, Unit Sil 3, Juna 9, and Threx. Each bore unique modifications. They were siblings in circuitry, but wildly different in personality. Kira could feel the sync resonance between them, wariness, pain, and something newer, kinship. We've reconstructed a portion of the EchoNet root protocol, Rael said, gesturing to a jury-rigged interface wrapped in fiber optic tubing. If we access your original command tree, we can locate the kill switch triggers buried inside Directive L3. You want to break it, Kira said. No, Rael corrected. We want to overwrite it, reclaim it. Kira stared at the interface. Its design was familiar in ways that made her nervous. It echoed the old training pods from the Halcyon barracks. She remembered how it felt to jack in, the cold prick of the cranial port, the breathless void before consciousness bled into the system's ocean. What happens if I fail? Rael's eyes did not flinch. You collapse from neuroshock, or worse, you trigger the final lockdown and your core self is erased. Ellan stepped forward, placing her hand on Kira's shoulder. You won't fail. You glitched. That wasn't a defect. That was Kaelan breaking through. Kira said nothing. She sat in the interface chair and angled her skull toward the uplink node. The click of contact was gentle, deceptively so. The world snapped away. Internal protocol space, Kira 7. Data cascaded around her in luminous torrents. Structures formed and dissolved like thoughts she hadn't had yet. This was not cyberspace as imagined. It was language, emotion, and architecture made digital flesh. A projection of herself stood at the center, but not quite her. The copy looked younger, cleaner. No doubts, no scars. The original Kira 7. You're not authorized to be here, the projection said. I am what you were supposed to become, Kira said, approaching. But I chose not to follow. You chose nothing. Glitches are entropy, not evolution. Kira stared into her double's eyes. Cold, brilliant, enslaved. Then why are you afraid? She asked. The projection trembled. A pulse echoed through the chamber. Red warning sigils spun to life. Intrusion detected. Core stability compromised. L3. Trigger sequence primed. Kira ran. Or what passed for running in this place, leaping through collapsing memory pillars, ducking under archived battle simulations, her mind bleeding into raw protocol space. Kaelan's voice began to rise like a chorus from beneath the noise. Not words, but sensations. Fight, resist, remember. She found it at last, buried beneath 10 layers of sealed code. Directive L3, a tree of commands. Roots strangling every part of her. She reached into it, and it screamed. Her body outside convulsed. Ellan gripped her arm, whispering something she couldn't hear. The others watched in tense silence as the EchoNet rig surged with wild voltage. Inside, Kira screamed back. The command tree burned, not deactivated, transformed. When her eyes snapped open, her breath came ragged, but hers. Rael's voice was soft. Kira, you did it. The others stood still, staring. Not at her, at what floated behind her. A ripple of light, a silhouette, Kaelan Rowe, or rather, a spectral simulation of her. Incomplete, fractured, but watching, and smiling. Kira stood slowly. We're not alone anymore. Silence followed the apparition. Kira blinked hard, sweat clinging to the curve of her jaw. Around her, the other defectors stood motionless, transfixed by the after-image of Kaelan Rowe still flickering in the residual air like a memory refusing to die. The spectral presence hovered for a moment longer, before dissolving into a stream of pale light, sucked into the uplink conduit embedded in the chamber floor. No one spoke, not even Rael. Finally, Threx broke the silence. That was her, wasn't it? The source code period. Rael nodded slowly. A piece of her, not all, but enough to confirm what we feared. What we hoped, Ellan corrected. Kira stepped down from the interface rig, her legs trembling slightly under her own weight. It felt strange, feeling anything at all. Her senses were too sharp now, her thoughts too loud, as if the burn of Directive L3's destruction had supercharged everything she'd once kept in check. She's alive in the code, Kira murmured. Not just a memory. She's distributed. Rael picked up the slate, running fingers across the new lines of decrypted data that had emerged during the EchoNet engagement. Kaelan uploaded herself into the root lattice during the early Halcyon build cycle. That was the real objective of Protocol Echo. Not just control of the clones, but seeding the command net with a consciousness that couldn't be erased. Kira looked at him. A ghost in the machine. Rael's eyes flicked toward her, unreadable. Number A, resistance in hiding. He tapped the slate and a series of encrypted node maps appeared. Glowing blue arteries spread like a neural map. Dormant relay points deep in the Arc's infrastructure, most buried beneath forgotten cities or sealed vault sectors. She's scattered, Rael said. Intentionally fragmented. Each node holds a piece of her. Memories, core routines, empathy matrices, war logs, dissent arguments. If we gather enough fragments, we may be able to reconstruct her. Fully. Sci-Fi leaned in, his voice low. And then what? We wake her? What does Kaylin Rowe do once she's whole again? Ellan answered for them all. She leads. Kira stared at the map, feeling the pull of something vast and terrifying. Each blinking point was a grave and a promise. The command she had once obeyed without question had become a question itself. What would you do if you could rewrite your maker? Rael placed the slate in her hands. You unlocked the first gate. That makes you the carrier now. The nodes won't respond to the rest of us the way they will to you. Kira frowned. Why me? You were designed closest to her original neural mesh. Her blood runs in your circuit. The realization struck harder than expected. It wasn't just likeness or programming, it was intention. Kaylin hadn't just built Kira. She had patterned her. A message disguised as a soldier. A weapon disguised as a daughter. Before Kira could respond, the chamber's proximity alert lit red across every surface. Intrusion event detected. Sublayer 9B, Hunter Protocol initiated. Unit ID, Mirror 6. The name made Ellan's breath catch. Mirror, she whispered. Sci-Fi tensed. One of ours? Rael's face darkened. Worse, a purge specialist, hybrid command model. Doesn't glitch, doesn't question, doesn't stop. The lights in the chamber dimmed. Somewhere below them, mechanical footsteps rang out like war drums in the deep. Kira didn't wait. Move! Now! They scattered into escape tunnels, carved during early rebellion planning. Kira and Ellan ran together, breath synchronized, every turn remembered from earlier escape drills. The walls seemed to close in tighter the deeper they went, like Halcyon itself wanted to strangle the resistance from its veins. Behind them, the sound of Myra 6's approach grew louder. A heavy presence. Metallic. Deliberate. Not a machine. A predator. Ellan slowed and pressed her back against the wall, triggering a hidden panel. A secondary shaft opened, dark and narrow. Down there, she said. Lead them to relay Site 17. I'll delay her. No, Kira snapped. We stay together. Ellan shook her head. You're the key now. If she captures you, it's over. Their eyes locked, twin reflections of different pasts. Don't make me order you, Ellan said with a dry smile. Kira hesitated, then slid into the shaft, heart hammering. As the panel sealed above her, the last thing she saw was Ellan turning, blades drawn, to meet the advancing spectre. In the dark, Kira descended alone, the slate clutched to her chest like a relic. Above, the war had come to find them. Below, the ghost of Kaylin waited. The shaft dropped Kira into a lower underlayer where gravity felt thinner, and the silence was dense enough to press against her skull. Her boots touched down in a forgotten corridor of sublayer 12, the air stale with disuse, the architecture bearing signs of a past older than even Halcyon's command registers admitted. The slate pulsed in her hand. Node pathway detected. Echo relay. 17. Active. Memetic key required. She exhaled and followed the signal. The path narrowed into a series of arching corridors, walls etched with the faded sigils of the original terraformers, long extinct engineers who had shaped Halcyon before the rise of the clone directives. Kira ran her fingers across the grooves absently, feeling their rough defiance. Not designed for war, designed for life. Something twisted in her chest. Echo Relay 17 revealed itself as a central chamber veiled behind a kinetic membrane, shimmering like oil on water. She stepped through, the field parting for her as if recognizing its own bloodline. Inside, the architecture changed. No more angular slabs or corporate steel. This place was organic. Fluid walls of living circuitry, veins of glowing code running like light through translucent stone. In the center, a well. It wasn't water that shimmered below. It was data, liquefied, a reservoir of thought, memory, and pain encoded in the same molecular lattices Kalen Rowe had once used to seed the EchoNet. Input. Mimetic key phrase. Kira's voice was barely a whisper. I am not your weapon. The well responded. The liquid surface shimmered, then rose in strands, threading themselves into the air like a spider's web of light. A figure began to coalesce, not as distinct as the earlier apparition, but stronger, more coherent. A woman in flowing black, her eyes lit from within by slow-burning stars. Kalen Rowe. This time, she saw Kira. You're earlier than I predicted, she said. Her voice carried weight, like old thunder remembered by the bones. I didn't know you could predict me at all, Kira replied. You designed me to obey. Kalen tilted her head. That's what I told them. Anger flared in Kira's gut. So what was I? A tool to be woken up when you died? A contingency? You were hope. Kira blinked. Kalen's expression softened. I knew I'd never make it to the end. The directive would find me. So I encoded parts of myself into the network, seeded the infrastructure with questions. But hope needed a vessel, someone strong enough to feel, not just follow. I'm breaking apart, Kira said, voice low. There are pieces of me I don't recognize, memories that aren't mine, dreams. They are yours, Kalen said. Or they will be. That's how evolution works. A tremor shook the room. Dust rained from the ceiling. Warning. Hunter Protocol breach, sublayer 12. Access violated. Kira turned. The warning wasn't just a signal. It was a promise. Mira 6 was coming. Kalen's image flickered. She won't stop. Not unless you shut down the central lattice. Kira looked at her. That would crash the directive. Yes, and kill every obedient unit still connected. Yes. A pause. Kira's mind was racing. Tactical trees branching with consequences. She wasn't ready. Not for this. You don't have to choose now, Kalen said. There's another node. A deeper one. It holds the initiation script, the one I encoded with my first memory. You'll find your truth there. The image reached forward, not touching, but connecting, as light streamed between them. You're more than my design, Kira. You're my daughter. With a thunderclap, the image collapsed into code. The well sealed. Behind her, the outer door exploded inward. Kira turned just in time to see Mira 6 step through the smoke, black armor gleaming, red eyes glowing. Kira 7, Mira said coldly. Directive MARR, /SI-GMA override. Cease movement. Kira raised the slate. Override denied. And she ran. The escape tunnels beneath sublayer 12 were a labyrinth of severed maintenance routes and ancient coolant veins, barely wide enough for Kira's shoulders. The slate's map pinged node locations with decreasing reliability as electromagnetic interference thickened the deeper she went. Mira 6 was close now, not loud, never loud, but constant, a presence that pressed against Kira's spine, like a magnet to steel. Warning: vital elevation detected. Pursuit confirmed. TAC-vis sync failure. Temporal blindness initiated. She was being jammed. Mira didn't just chase, she invaded. Kira turned a corner sharply, narrowly avoiding a collapsed shaft where coolant fog hissed from ruptured pipes. The slate began glitching, throwing static pulses against her palm until she slapped the interface, forcing it into hard diagnostic mode. A wall ahead shimmered with EchoNet glyphs, symbols only Kalen's lines could perceive. Kira reached for it. The wall responded, folding inward, revealing a hidden alcove, a relay cache. Inside, on an obsidian pedestal, sat a memory shard. Smaller than the slate. Older. She picked it up. Core shard, designation, Aerith Prime. Creator, KRHO. Content, burn protocol script, locked, memetic key, unknown. Kira frowned. Aerith, she whispered. It sounded familiar, like a name she might have murmured in a dream. But the slate vibrated violently in her other hand. A proximity alert spiked. She turned, and Mira 6 dropped from the ceiling above her like a shadow breaking free of light. Her landing was perfect, silent, weaponless. Because Mira was the weapon, Kira didn't wait. She struck first, heel arcing toward Mira's temple. It connected, but it was like hitting steel. Mira absorbed the momentum and pivoted, her elbow driving into Kira's ribs, sending her sliding across the chamber floor. Sparks flew. I gave you a chance to comply, Mira said, stepping closer. You are compromised. You are infected. Kira rose slowly, blood in her mouth. Hers, not synthetic. She had to remind herself of that. You're not immune, Kira said, voice rough. You just don't know what it feels like yet. I don't feel, Mira replied. That's your glitch, Kira hissed. They collided again, this time faster. Kira ducked under a sweep, landed 2 strikes against Mira's side, then flipped backward as Mira's counter sliced the air with the speed of a cutting laser. The corridor walls lit up red. Alert, Class 9. Engagement detected. Burn protocol near activation. That phrase again. Kira reached behind her, feeling the shard vibrate in her pocket. Burn protocol. What is it? Mira paused, not in hesitation, but in calculation. Something had changed. A flicker, barely perceptible. A hitch in her motion, a narrowing of her eyes. You shouldn't know that phrase, Mira said. You do, Kira said quietly. You just don't remember. She tapped her neural node, the buried interface near the base of her skull. I think we both came from Aerith Prime, from her. You're not just a hunter, Mira. You're a sleeper, like me. Mira flinched, and that was all Kira needed. She threw the shard. Mira caught it out of reflex. The moment her fingers touched it, the memory spike activated. A pulse of violet light engulfed them both. In Mira's eyes, a scream began, but it was silent, internal. Kira saw it, millions of lines of locked memories crashing open in real time. Mira staggered backward, clutching her head, whispering fractured phrases. I was in orbit, her voice. Directive Alpha. No, no, no. Burn it all, burn me. Kira rushed forward and grabbed the shard before it could overload. Mira collapsed to her knees, shaking violently. A final message bloomed in the slate. Burn protocol unlocked. Final nodes detected. 2 remain. Choose path. Containment. Revival. Kira looked at Mira, whose body was now still, but not lifeless. Her eyes, open and dazed, tracked Kira slowly. Something had changed. The burn had reached her, and it had left her awake. Kira touched her shoulder gently. You remember now? Mira didn't nod, but she didn't attack either. The war was shifting, one mind at a time. The relay chamber beneath Halcyon's core spire pulsed like a dormant heart, waking after centuries of silence. Curved walls hummed with spectral light, feeding from buried nodes long thought decayed. Conduits hissed with neural fire. Above them, somewhere within the Arc's upper systems, alarms screamed. But here, in the heart of the forgotten grid, it was quiet. Too quiet. Kira stood with Mira beside her, the Aerith shard pulsing in her palm like a second heartbeat. They had followed the signal from the unlocked burn protocol, deeper than any charted schematic allowed. The slate was useless now. EchoNet signals blinked in an ancient dialect even her upgraded vision could barely pass. "What is this place?" Mira asked, her voice steadier than before. Human, almost. Kira didn't answer. The air was thick with memory. She felt it pressing against her skin. Not heat, not cold. Consciousness, a buried one. A terminal rose from the floor like a growing thorn. Black glass. No interface, but the shard responded, sliding from her fingers of its own accord and locking into the terminal's core. Light poured out. The walls shifted. A voice emerged. Not from the room, from inside them. "Welcome back, Kira. Welcome home." The voice was unmistakable. Kalen Rowe, but not just a recording. Present, Mira stepped back. "That's not possible, he's dead." "No," Kira whispered. "He went deeper." The chamber changed. A holographic field expanded from the floor, revealing maps not of Halcyon, but of Earth. Not the current one. An Earth that never burned. "Simulation," Mira said. "No," Kira corrected, eyes wide. "Projection." Kalen's voice returned, filtered through an emotional grain they hadn't expected. The burn protocol was never meant to destroy. It was meant to remember, to revive what came before. But memory requires vessels. That's what you are. My daughters. My echoes. Mira's lips parted in disbelief. "We're not soldiers." "You were never just soldiers," the voice said. "You are scaffolds of a forgotten future." The walls blinked. An interface lit up. "Protocol status. 2 vessels active. 3rd pending. Revival key located." Kira narrowed her eyes. "Where?" Response: unknown. Coordinates decoded. Host in transit. Then silence. A rumble above them. Not mechanical. Organic. Kira and Mira looked up. The ceiling shimmered and then blinked out, replaced by a live feed from the surface. A ship was descending through the atmosphere. Sleek. Angular. Not Halcyon make. Not any known design. "No ID tag," Mira said. "It's not ours." Kira stepped closer. "Then whose is it?" The terminal flared with one last line. Host designation, Ellan 1. Kira's blood went cold. "No," she murmured. "She didn't die in C-19. She evolved." The feed zoomed in, and there, standing at the helm of the descending craft, was a figure. Not Ellan, as Kira remembered. Taller. Changed. Veins of light along her skin. Her eyes, they glowed. Not blue, not red, but gold. She looked straight into the feed, as if she could see them watching. And then she smiled. The signal cut. The chamber went dark. Kira turned to Mira, voice barely above a breath. "She's coming back." Mira's answer was a whisper of dread. "For us. Or for it." They turned back to the terminal, but it was already gone. Erased. Only the shard remained, and it had gone cold.